The morning air was still cool when she stood outside the restaurant, staring at the tall glass doors. Her hands were tight around the strap of her worn bag. Inside, soft lights glowed, and tables were already set with clean white cloths and shining glasses. It looked nothing like the places she had worked before. This was her first day, and she could not afford to mess it up. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The restaurant smelled of fresh bread, coffee, and polished wood. Everything looked expensive. The floor shined like a mirror, and the walls held quiet paintings she did not understand. She felt small walking across the room, like she did not belong there. But she reminded herself that work was work. She had earned this chance. At the staff desk, a supervisor handed her a simple uniform and explained the basics. The voice was quick, businesslike, and cold, as if there was no time for mistakes. She listened carefully, nodding at every instruction. She had learned long ago that listening was the first step to surviving any job. As she changed and tied her apron, she noticed how the other workers moved. They were fast and confident, clearly used to the place. Some laughed quietly. Others looked tired. A few glanced at her with quick curiosity, then looked away. She could feel their eyes on her, measuring her. She tried to stay calm. When she stepped back onto the floor, her heart beat faster. The restaurant was starting to fill. Early guests came in, well-dressed and relaxed, talking softly as if loud voices did not belong here. She picked up a tray and stood near the side, waiting for instructions. That was when one of the older servers leaned close to her. "You're new," the woman said quietly. She nodded. "Yes, first day." The woman's face tightened a little. "Listen," she said, lowering her voice even more. "There's something you need to know." Before she could respond, another server joined them, then another. Their expressions were serious, almost worried. "If a certain man comes in today," one of them said, "do not serve him." Her brow furrowed. "Why?" They exchanged looks. The older woman spoke again. "He's trouble. Rich, powerful. He likes to test people." Another added, "He makes servers cry, gets them fired. He enjoys it." Her stomach dropped. "Then why is he allowed here?" The answer came quickly. "Because he spends a lot of money." She swallowed. "What does he look like?" she asked. "You'll know," someone said. "Everyone does." The supervisor passed by just then, and the group broke apart like nothing had happened. She stood there, confused and uneasy. It was her first day, and already there was a warning hanging in the air. She tried to focus on her tasks, pouring water, carrying plates, remembering table numbers. Her hands shook at first, but slowly, she found a rhythm. Each small success gave her a bit more confidence. Still, the warning stayed in her mind. An hour passed, then another. The lunch crowd grew thicker. She was wiping a table when the room suddenly felt different. Voices lowered. Movements slowed. It was as if a shadow had entered before the person did. She looked up. A man walked in wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than her monthly pay. His posture was straight, his face calm, but his eyes scanned the room like he owned it. A quiet tension followed him as he moved. She knew instantly. Whispers spread among the staff. Some turned away. Others pretended to be busy. No one rushed to greet him. The supervisor noticed him and hesitated, then glanced around. The experienced servers avoided eye contact. Plates suddenly needed polishing. Orders suddenly needed checking. She stood frozen. Her section included the table near the window where the man had stopped. The supervisor looked at her, then at the empty table, then back at her. There was a pause long enough to feel heavy. "Take that table," the supervisor said. Her chest tightened. "Me?" "Yes," came the short reply. "Go." She wanted to speak, to say what she had been told, but the words stuck in her throat. She needed this job. Walking away would not look good. She picked up a menu with hands that felt numb and walked toward the table. The man sat down slowly, folding his hands as he waited. He did not look at her at first. She stood there for a moment, unsure, then forced herself to speak. "Good afternoon," she said, keeping her voice steady. Welcome. He finally looked up. His eyes were sharp, unreadable. Water, he said. No ice. She nodded. Of course. As she turned away, she felt eyes burning into her back. From the staff. From guests. Everyone seemed to be watching, waiting for something to go wrong. She brought the water carefully and placed it in front of him. He did not thank her. He inspected the glass as if searching for a flaw. This table wobbles, he said. She checked it gently. It did not. I can fix that, she said calmly, placing a small fold under one leg. He raised an eyebrow. You're new, he said. Yes, she replied. That won't last, he said, taking a sip of water. They never do. The word stung, but she did not react. She had heard worse in life. She straightened her back. Would you like a moment with the menu? She asked. He leaned back in his chair. I already know what I want, but I'll change my mind 3 times. She paused for half a second, then nodded. That's fine. This time his eyes lingered on her. You're calm, he said. Most aren't. I'm here to work, she replied simply. Around them, the restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Other servers watched from a distance, their faces filled with a mix of fear and curiosity. Some shook their heads slightly, as if warning her without words. She took his order, or at least the first version of it, and repeated it carefully. He corrected her twice, then smiled faintly, as if disappointed that she did not slip. As she walked back toward the kitchen, her legs felt weak, but her mind was clear. She realized something important in that moment. Fear would not help her here. Only focus would. In the kitchen, a cook whispered, You okay? She nodded. Yes. Be careful, someone else said. She took a breath and picked up the plate when it was ready. When she returned to the table, the man watched her every step. She placed the dish gently, just as she had been trained. You didn't spill, he said. No, she answered. Most do. She met his eyes for the first time. Is there anything else you need? For a long moment he said nothing. Then he waved a hand. We'll see. As she stepped away, her heart still raced. But there was something else now. A small spark of strength. She had faced him and she was still standing. She did not know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The lunch crowd had grown louder, the soft clatter of dishes blending with conversations. But around the man's table, the air seemed different. People moved cautiously, as if his presence had shifted the energy of the room. The young waitress kept her distance at first, letting him look over the menu, but she could feel the tension pressing on her shoulders. Every eye in the restaurant was on them. Every server seemed to hold their breath, waiting for disaster. She reminded herself that she had been warned, but the warning could not control her actions. She had come here to work. She had come here to prove that she could handle whatever came her way. That thought gave her a small, quiet courage she held onto tightly. The man finally spoke, his voice low but commanding. You know, most new servers can't even carry a tray without shaking. Why did they put you here? She straightened her back, keeping her voice steady. I am here to do my job, sir. I will do it to the best of my ability. He studied her for a long moment. There was something in his eyes that made her pause. It wasn't anger exactly, but it was sharp, curious, and careful. He leaned back slightly in his chair, folding his hands. Interesting, he said. Most don't have that kind of confidence. The words surprised her. No one had ever called her confident before. Usually they assumed she was timid, unsure, easy to push around. She nodded quietly, keeping her composure, though inside she felt a flutter of pride. Very well, he continued. I want the salmon, medium rare, but I will change my mind twice before I eat it. Do you understand? Yes, she replied, a small, calm smile forming. I will follow your instructions. He looked at her, and for a moment, the intensity faded into something else, something unreadable. She returned to the kitchen, careful not to rush, careful not to show the tiniest sign of fear. She could hear him from across the room, giving subtle, low instructions about the arrangement of his cutlery, the temperature of the wine, the angle of the chair. She worked efficiently, repeating each instruction in her mind so that she would not make a mistake. Every other server watched silently. Some shook their heads at her bravery. Some shook their heads at what they thought might be foolishness. But she focused only on him. When she brought the salmon to the table, he leaned forward slightly, examining it. "Not bad," he said. "Better than I expected." She let herself relax just a little. "Thank you," she replied. "Please let me know if you need anything else." He nodded and leaned back. There was silence for a few moments, only the soft sounds of cutlery and quiet conversation around them. Then he spoke again, softer this time. "You're calm. That's rare." She met his gaze steadily. "I do my best to stay professional." His lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly. "Professionalism. Yes, that is important. I like people who are professional." She felt a strange mix of relief and caution. She could sense that he was testing her, but she didn't know how far he would go. Still, she refused to back down. She would not allow fear to guide her actions. She had faced difficult people before, though never someone like this, and she had survived. She could do this. Throughout the meal, he made small remarks. Some were sharp, some were subtle jabs. "You brought that water too late," he said at one point, though she had brought it immediately after his request. "This table arrangement is off," he commented quietly as he shifted his chair. Each time, she paused, considered, and corrected without argument or embarrassment. She spoke clearly, respectfully, but she did not allow him to dominate or belittle her. She could feel the eyes of the other staff on her, and though they seemed impressed, some were still skeptical. After a few moments, he surprised her. "You have patience," he said. "That is not something most people have. Why do you have it?" She took a deep breath. "I've learned that patience helps me handle difficult situations. It helps me focus on what is important rather than on fear or anger." He seemed to study her even more closely. Then he said, "Do you ever get scared?" "Yes," she admitted quietly, "but I try not to let it control me." He leaned back, silent for a moment, and then a slow smile appeared on his face. It was the first time she had seen any warmth in him. "Interesting," he murmured. "Most people let fear control them, yes. Most people fail because of it." Her heart raced. She had survived the first part of this test without losing her composure. She had stood in front of someone intimidating, someone everyone else feared, and she had not flinched. That gave her a quiet confidence she had not felt before. During the next half hour, he continued to observe her closely. Every time she approached, she moved carefully, spoke clearly, and responded politely, yet firmly, to every small criticism. She could see the curiosity in his eyes. He was no longer looking at her as just another server. He was analyzing her, perhaps wondering what she was made of. Other staff began to relax slightly, noticing that he was not shouting or humiliating her. They whispered among themselves. "She's handling him well," one said quietly. "Better than anyone else would." Despite the tension, she found herself noticing small things. How he adjusted his tie constantly. How he tapped his fingers when thinking. How he watched the restaurant, almost as if he was evaluating everyone. She realized that he was meticulous, exacting, and demanding, but also careful, deliberate. He was testing her, but she also began to understand that he was not cruel by nature. He was curious and sharp, expecting the same attention and focus from others that he demanded of himself. When it was finally time for dessert, he changed his order 3 times, just as he had promised, testing her patience and professionalism. Each time, she nodded calmly, repeated the request back to him to confirm, and delivered the correct dish without complaint. The final order was correct, perfectly arranged, and he examined it carefully before taking a bite. "Excellent," he said simply. "You passed." She blinked, surprised. "Passed?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Yes, most people fail. They argue, they flinch, they panic. You handled it, with patience, respect, and firmness. That is rare." Her chest swelled with a quiet pride. She had faced him and she had won. not by shouting or defiance, but by staying calm, professional, and true to herself. He paid the bill generously, left a tip that was far more than expected, and finally stood to leave. As he walked away, he nodded slightly at her. There was no boast, no arrogance, only acknowledgement. She had earned it. When the door closed behind him, the tension in the restaurant lifted. Other servers approached her cautiously, whispering congratulations and asking how she had stayed so calm. She smiled, still catching her breath. She had learned something important that day. Courage is not about being fearless. It is about standing firm, even when fear is present. She returned to her work, a little taller, a little stronger, carrying herself differently. She knew that she had proven something, not just to the man but to herself. And she understood that this experience would stay with her for the rest of her career. The day continued, but the memory of that encounter stayed with her. Every tray she carried, every glass she polished, every table she served reminded her that she had faced someone who seemed impossible, someone everyone feared, and she had not only survived, she had excelled. It was a quiet victory, but it felt monumental. And she knew, deep inside, that this was only the beginning of what she could achieve if she continued to trust herself, stay calm, and face challenges head-on. By the end of her shift, she was exhausted, but not broken. She had been tested in a way she had never expected, and she had come out stronger. She stepped outside into the evening air, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of the day and the small triumph she had earned. She knew tomorrow would bring new challenges, new difficult customers, and perhaps new fears, but she also knew something more important. She had the strength to face them, and that was a feeling that no warning, no fear, and no powerful man could ever take away. The next day, she arrived at the restaurant with a quiet sense of determination. Yesterday's encounter with the millionaire had left her both proud and nervous. She had proven something to herself, but she knew that the challenge was far from over. The staff still whispered about the man and her handling of him, and the tension in the air reminded her that this was no ordinary job. As she tied her apron and prepared for her shift, she could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her. Some looked impressed, others skeptical, and a few, especially the older staff, seemed almost protective, as if trying to warn her without words. She reminded herself to stay focused. Today was about work, not reputation. By late morning, the restaurant began to fill. She moved carefully, taking orders, delivering drinks, and keeping a careful eye on every table. Everything seemed normal until the doors opened, and a hush fell over the room. She knew immediately who it was. The man walked in, his presence commanding even without words. His eyes scanned the room like before, sharp and calculating. Servers stepped back, and the manager gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, leaving her to handle the table. Her heart beat faster, but she forced herself to move with calm and purpose. She remembered yesterday, remembered that confidence and composure had been her strongest tools. She walked toward the table, holding her head high, a tray balanced carefully in her hands. "Good afternoon," she said, keeping her voice steady. He looked up, a faint smile on his lips. "Ah, you again," he said. "I was hoping you would be here." She nodded politely. "I am here to serve you, sir." He studied her for a moment, then leaned back. "I hope you're ready today. Yesterday was interesting, but I want to see more. You understand?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I will do my best." As she took his order, she noticed a different side of him. He was sharper today, more demanding, testing her patience in ways she had not experienced before. He made small comments about how quickly she moved, the angle at which she set the silverware, and even the way she poured water. Each comment was precise, almost surgical, designed to test her composure. At first, she felt her hands tremble slightly, but she took a deep breath and reminded herself of the lesson she had learned yesterday. Fear would not help her. Only focus, professionalism, and calmness would allow her to succeed. She repeated his instructions quietly in her mind, then carried them out exactly. "Not bad," he said after a few moments. "Better than yesterday, but not perfect. Do you see the difference?" "Yes," she replied. I see what needs to be corrected. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. Most people would have taken offense by now or panicked. You do not. Why? I focus on the task, she said simply. And I respect your instructions. That helps me stay calm. He studied her for a long time, as if weighing every word. Then he made a small gesture with his hand. Good. That is rare. Most people fail before even trying. You are different. The words gave her a small boost of confidence, but she did not let herself relax. She knew that he was testing her, and that one small mistake could change the dynamic entirely. She moved with care, spoke with clarity, and responded to his subtle criticisms with calm, respectful adjustments. At one point, he deliberately shifted the table slightly and watched her reaction. She noticed immediately and corrected it without hesitation. He leaned back, folding his hands, and said, Impressive. You notice small details that most people miss. That is important in life. She nodded quietly, understanding that he was not only testing her skill, but also her character. He wanted to see how she handled pressure, how she responded to criticism, and whether she could maintain her dignity in the face of someone who had power over her. Throughout the meal, he continued to make subtle remarks, pushing her limits without overt rudeness. This water is slightly warm, he said. Not ideal. I will correct it immediately, she replied, fetching a fresh glass. He took a small sip, then studied her silently. Better, but you could improve more. Do you understand? Yes, she said calmly. I will continue to do my best. As the meal progressed, she realized that this was more than just a test of her service skills. It was a test of her patience, her composure, and her ability to stand firm under scrutiny. Every instruction, every remark, every subtle criticism was designed to push her to her limits. At one point, he leaned forward, his voice sharper. Most people would have cried by now. They would have given up. You are still standing. Why? I believe in doing my best, she said. Even when it is difficult. I do not let fear control my actions. He studied her for a long time, then leaned back and smiled faintly. Very well. That is more than most can say. You have strength. For the first time, she noticed a small change in his demeanor. The sharpness in his eyes softened slightly. There was still intensity, but there was also curiosity and perhaps even respect. She continued her work, moving with care and precision, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment with each successful task. The other staff began to notice the shift as well. They whispered quietly among themselves, some shaking their heads in disbelief. She's holding her own, one said. Better than anyone expected. The man watched her closely throughout the meal, occasionally making small corrections, but never in a way that humiliated her. Each time, she responded calmly, firmly, and respectfully. She realized that this was more than a test of skill. It was a test of character. He wanted to see whether she could maintain her dignity, her composure, and her confidence under pressure. As the meal drew to a close, he leaned back and said quietly, You have done well today. Very well. She felt a small surge of pride but kept her expression neutral. Thank you, sir, she said. He nodded, then reached for his wallet. The tip he left was generous, far more than she had expected. But more than the money, it was the acknowledgement of her effort, her composure, and her professionalism. When he left, the tension in the restaurant lifted. Other servers approached her cautiously, whispering congratulations and asking how she had managed to stay so calm. She smiled, feeling both exhausted and proud. She had faced a challenge that many feared, and she had not only survived but excelled. She returned to her work, carrying herself with a quiet confidence she had never felt before. She knew that the man would return, and that he might test her again. But she also knew that she had learned an important lesson. True strength comes not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them head-on, with composure, respect, and confidence. By the end of her shift, she was tired, but not defeated. She had proven something to herself, and that sense of quiet victory stayed with her long after the restaurant doors closed. She knew that tomorrow might bring new challenges, But she was ready. She had faced one of the most difficult people she had ever encountered, and she had won. Not through arrogance or defiance, but through calm, careful, and confident action. As she walked home, she thought about what had happened and realized that this experience was more than a test of her skills. It was a test of her character. She had faced fear and pressure, and she had responded with strength and dignity. And that knowledge, she knew, would stay with her for the rest of her life, guiding her through every challenge that lay ahead. The next day, she arrived at the restaurant feeling a mix of anticipation and nerves. The previous encounters with the millionaire had left a mark on her, both challenging and inspiring. She had learned that confidence and calm could hold their own against someone intimidating, but she also knew that today could bring a new kind of test. The restaurant was buzzing with the lunchtime crowd. Servers moved quickly, trays balanced carefully in their hands. She slipped into her uniform, tying her apron with steady fingers. Her mind was already running through the lessons she had learned. Stay calm, listen carefully, act professionally, and never let fear control her. By mid-morning, she noticed him walking toward the restaurant. The room seemed to shift instantly. Conversations quieted, chairs were adjusted, and the staff tensed. She felt her chest tighten, but she reminded herself of yesterday's successes. She could do this again. She had done it before, and she could do it again. When he reached the table by the window, she took a deep breath and approached him, holding her head high. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice steady. He looked up, his sharp eyes assessing her from head to toe. "I was hoping you would be here today," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I have been curious about you since yesterday. You handled yourself well. But today, I want to see how far you can go." Her stomach twisted. She knew this meant he would challenge her more than ever before. Still, she nodded calmly. "I will do my best, sir." As she took his order, she realized that his requests were far more precise and demanding than yesterday. Every instruction had a hidden test, every small comment a challenge to her composure. He asked for water served in a certain way, dishes arranged at exact angles, and even requested subtle adjustments to the table setting while observing her reaction closely. She worked carefully, repeating his instructions in her mind and executing them without hesitation. Her hands moved steadily, her voice remained calm, and her mind focused entirely on the task at hand. She could feel his eyes on her, studying her reactions, testing her patience, and trying to provoke a response. At one point, he leaned forward, his tone sharper than before. Most servers would have lost their temper by now. They would have argued, panicked, or made mistakes. "Why do you remain calm?" She met his gaze steadily. "Because I focus on what I can control," she said. "I do not let fear or frustration guide my actions. I stay professional and respectful." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he leaned back and let out a low laugh. "I see. You are stronger than I expected. Most people crumble under pressure, yet you hold yourself together. That is impressive." She allowed herself a small, polite smile. "Thank you, sir. I have learned that staying composed is the best way to handle difficult situations." The rest of the meal continued in a tense rhythm. He made subtle, almost cruel remarks designed to provoke her. "This wine glass is slightly off-center," he said quietly. "Do you see that?" "Yes, sir," she replied calmly, adjusting it with care. "Thank you for pointing it out." He raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by her measured response. "Most people would have argued or become flustered. You simply fix it." Fascinating. As the meal went on, she noticed something changing in him. His sharp, testing gaze softened slightly. He was still exacting and demanding, but there was now a hint of curiosity and respect. He asked her small questions about her work, her routines, and even her approach to challenging customers. She answered truthfully, speaking about the importance of patience, focus, and calmness. "You think carefully before you act," he said at one point. "Most people rush and fail. You plan and adjust. That is rare." "Yes," she replied. I have learned that it is better to take a moment to understand what is needed than to act in fear or haste. He seemed to nod, as if approving her perspective. Then, surprisingly, he began to share a small part of himself. He spoke about his work, the responsibilities he carried, and the pressures he faced. For the first time, she saw a glimpse of the man behind the intimidating exterior. A man who was not cruel for no reason, but who tested others because he valued excellence and strength. You see, he said quietly, I challenge people because I want to know who they really are. Most cannot handle it. Most fail because they let emotions control them. You are different. You face it with respect and clarity. She listened carefully, realizing that this was no longer just a test of her service skills. It had become a conversation about character, strength, and human dignity. She understood that he was looking for more than obedience. He wanted to see courage, composure, and honesty. The meal continued, and he changed his mind on several orders, as he had promised, testing her patience further. She adjusted with calm and grace, never showing frustration or anger. With each challenge, she felt a quiet sense of achievement. She was not just surviving his scrutiny. She was navigating it with skill and integrity. At one point, he leaned back and observed her carefully. I admit, he said, I did not expect you to handle this so well. Most people would have faltered by now. You have strength, and something more. I am curious about how far that goes. She met his gaze without hesitation. I believe strength comes from staying true to yourself and handling challenges with honesty and calmness. That is all I can offer. He studied her, then nodded slowly, a faint smile appearing. Very well. You have earned my respect. When the meal ended, he left a generous tip and spoke to the manager privately. She overheard him praising her patience, professionalism, and composure. Her colleagues who had doubted her earlier looked impressed and somewhat surprised. She felt a deep sense of pride, not just because of the recognition, but because she had faced a difficult person, a real challenge, and had done so with dignity. After he left, the staff gathered around her quietly. Some congratulated her. Others asked how she managed to remain so calm under pressure. She smiled politely, feeling both exhausted and accomplished. The experience had tested her in ways she had never imagined, but it had also taught her something invaluable. True strength comes not from avoiding challenges, but from meeting them with courage, composure, and respect. As she returned to her duties, she noticed that the atmosphere of the restaurant had shifted slightly. The staff seemed to carry themselves with a bit more confidence, perhaps inspired by the way she had faced someone intimidating and demanding. Even the customers seemed to sense a different energy, a calmness and professionalism that radiated from her, quietly influencing those around her. By the end of her shift, she was tired, but the fatigue was mixed with a sense of accomplishment and growth. She had faced one of the most challenging people she had ever encountered, someone known for breaking others' confidence, and she had not only survived but had earned respect. Walking home that evening, she reflected on the events of the day. She realized that this encounter had not just been about serving a difficult customer. It had been a test of character, patience, and inner strength. She felt a quiet pride in herself, knowing that she had handled the situation with grace, calmness, and integrity. She understood that life would continue to present challenges, sometimes in unexpected forms, and that fear and doubt were natural responses. But she also knew now that true courage was in facing those challenges, standing firm, and acting with honesty and respect, even when the stakes were high. The memory of the millionaire's scrutiny and subtle tests stayed with her, but instead of feeling intimidated, she felt empowered. She had learned that confidence and composure were tools that could carry her through difficult situations, and that integrity and patience could earn respect even from the most demanding people. That night, she went to bed feeling a quiet sense of victory. She had faced fear, pressure, and expectation, and had come through stronger. She knew that tomorrow might bring new challenges, new demanding customers, and perhaps new tests of her patience and strength. But she also knew that she had the tools, the mindset, and the courage to handle them. And for the first time, she felt truly ready for whatever came next. The following morning, she arrived at the restaurant with a quiet resolve. The last few days had tested her in ways she had never imagined. Serving a difficult, wealthy customer had pushed her patience, her focus, and her courage to the limits. But each encounter had left her stronger, more confident, and more aware of her own abilities. Today, she knew, could bring something new, perhaps another challenge, perhaps recognition. She did not know exactly what to expect, but she felt ready. The restaurant hummed with activity as the lunch crowd began to arrive. She moved carefully among the tables, carrying trays, refilling drinks, and making sure every guest felt attended to. She had learned to keep a calm presence, a steady rhythm, that helped her focus even when the room felt chaotic. She had learned that small actions, placing a glass carefully, speaking clearly, noticing details, could make a big difference. Then she saw him again. The millionaire walked in, as commanding as ever, but there was a subtle change in the way he carried himself. He looked around the room, scanning the tables, and finally stopped at the one near the window. She took a deep breath and approached him. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice steady. He looked at her for a moment, then smiled faintly. "I was hoping you would be here," he said. "I have been thinking about our past encounters. You handled yourself well before, but today, I want to see something different." She nodded, calm but alert. "I will do my best, sir." From the moment she began serving him, she noticed that today was indeed different. His requests were precise, but they were more subtle. Instead of testing her with obvious criticism, he observed her reactions quietly, waiting to see how she handled small, unspoken challenges. He shifted the cutlery slightly, moved a napkin just a little off-center, and watched her carefully. She noticed immediately, adjusted without hesitation, and kept her composure. "Most people would have panicked by now," he said quietly. "But you are consistent." "Why?" "I focus on what I can control," she replied calmly. "I try not to let fear or doubt influence my actions. I stay professional and honest." He studied her, leaning back in his chair, and for the first time, she saw a softer side to him. His sharp gaze held a mix of curiosity and respect. "It is rare to see that," he said. "Most people crumble under even small pressure. You do not. You hold yourself together." She felt a quiet sense of pride, but she did not let herself relax. She continued her work with care and attention, moving efficiently, speaking politely, and responding to his subtle tests without losing her composure. Each small challenge he presented, she met calmly and firmly, quietly proving that she could handle more than he or anyone else expected. Throughout the meal, he began to ask her small, personal questions, not intrusive but curious. He asked about her approach to difficult situations, what she learned from past experiences, and how she stayed calm under pressure. She answered honestly, speaking about the importance of patience, preparation, and remaining true to herself. "You are honest," he said, "and thoughtful. Most people try to impress or deceive. You do neither. That is unusual." "I believe honesty is important," she said. "Even when it is difficult, it is better to face challenges openly than to hide from them." He nodded slowly, clearly considering her words. "I see," he said. "You have strength. You have patience. But you also have wisdom. That combination is rare." As she served the final course, she realized that this encounter was different from all the others. It was no longer just about testing her patience or her ability to serve well. It was a recognition of her character, her integrity, and her courage. She had earned respect not through arrogance or defiance, but through calm, steady, and honest action. When the meal ended, he left a generous tip and requested to speak with the manager privately. She watched from a distance as he praised her professionalism, her composure, and her courage under pressure. Her colleagues whispered among themselves, some surprised, some inspired. They had seen her face challenges that would have shaken most people, and she had emerged stronger every time. After he left, the manager approached her with a smile. "I want you to know," he said quietly, "that your work has been exceptional. Not just your service but the way you handled him. That takes courage and professionalism. You've earned the respect of everyone here." She smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest that went beyond recognition or praise. It was a quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes from knowing you stood your ground, faced fear, and acted with integrity. Over the next few days, her confidence grew. She continued to serve other customers with the same care, calmness, and focus. But she also noticed that the way she carried herself had changed. She walked a little taller, spoke a little more firmly, and moved with a quiet authority that drew respect. The lessons she had learned from facing the millionaire applied not just to him, but to everyone she served. The staff began to notice a difference too. Some came to her quietly for advice, asking how she stayed so composed under pressure. She shared what she had learned: patience, focus, honesty, and the courage to face challenges without fear. Her colleagues began to carry themselves differently, inspired by her example. Weeks later, the millionaire returned to the restaurant. When he saw her, a faint smile appeared on his face. He nodded slightly, not with superiority, but with acknowledgement. She had already faced his tests and emerged stronger, and he recognized that. "You are still here," he said quietly, almost approvingly, "and you have maintained your composure. That is impressive." "Thank you, sir," she replied calmly. "I have learned a lot from our encounters." He seemed to consider her words carefully, then nodded. "You have strength, patience, and character. Those are qualities that many people never develop. I respect that. You have earned it." For the first time, she realized something important. This experience had not been about him testing her alone. It had been about discovering her own strength, patience, and courage. She had faced someone intimidating, someone with power, and she had not only survived but had grown. She had learned that true strength is not about overpowering others, but about standing firm, being honest, and acting with dignity even when fear or pressure is present. As the man left the restaurant, she felt a sense of closure. She had faced the ultimate test of patience, composure, and courage. She had earned respect, not just from him, but from herself. She had discovered something deeper about her own character and realized that she could face any challenge that life might present. Her colleagues approached her quietly, offering congratulations and admiration. She smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. The recognition was meaningful, but the true reward was the confidence and strength she had discovered within herself. Over the following weeks, she continued to work at the restaurant with renewed energy. She approached every table with calmness and care, knowing that she had proven her abilities in a high-pressure situation. Her confidence inspired others, and her example quietly shifted the atmosphere of the restaurant. She often thought about the millionaire and the lessons he had unwittingly taught her. He had challenged her, tested her, and pushed her to her limits, but he had also shown her what she was capable of. She had learned that fear and doubt are natural, but they do not have to control actions. Composure, courage, and integrity can carry a person through the most difficult situations. By the end of her shift each day, she walked home with a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had faced challenges that most people would avoid, and she had come through stronger, wiser, and more confident. She knew that life would continue to present tests, some small, some large, but she also knew that she now had the strength to meet them. Her story became something quietly inspirational among the staff. New employees would hear about her encounters and the way she had handled a difficult customer with calmness and dignity. She became a subtle guide and a role model, showing that courage is not about loud displays of strength, but about quiet confidence, patience, and integrity. In the end, it was not about the money, the tips, or the recognition. It was about discovering her own power, standing firm in the face of fear, and learning that the greatest victories come from staying true to oneself. She had faced someone who seemed impossible, someone everyone feared, and she had won. Not by defiance, but by patience, honesty, and courage. That understanding stayed with her long after the restaurant doors closed each day. She knew that the lessons she had learned would guide her for the rest of her life, in every challenge and every decision. And she felt ready, fully and quietly, to face whatever came next. She had proven, to herself and the world, that courage and integrity are stronger than fear and intimidation, and that standing firm in one's truth can turn even the most difficult challenges into moments of growth and quiet triumph.